Susanna. Great to be with you.
Great to be with you too.
How are you?
I'm doing well. And yourself?
Yeah, I'm well. Thank you for offering your Friday night to us all.
It's great. Well, it's sort of living the yoga life. Every night is sort of like Friday night. So I'm like, Friday, Tuesday, Saturday. It's all beautiful and good.
Mm-hmm. Now, for our listeners that do not know you, I'd love for us to start with you maybe sharing a little bit about your journey, for starters, in terms of yoga, because a lot of our listeners are in the yoga arena. What brought you into yoga, for starters?
It's such an interesting and long answer.
Be as long as you need. Okay.
I found yoga when I was a little kid and thought it was really wonderful, and then didn't really do it until high school. And then I got super into it in high school and ended up actually helping teach it my senior year in high school. So I guess actually if I really talk about how long I've been teaching yoga, it's been quite a while. And then didn't do it for a while. After college, moved to New York, was 100% in the art world, and went to graduate school for fine arts and was making work and exhibiting work and lecturing and writing for the Museum of Modern Art, actually. And I did that for years and years. But I was so stressed out, New York City lifestyle being what it is, that I finally discovered yoga again. And that was really the way in which I kind of found my inner calm again. It was kind of funny because, you lose it when you move to New York, or most people do, because it's so dog eat dog and it's so intense. And I love New York, but you definitely have to have something that balances out the energy. And when I kept looking for teachers, and I finally found one who I loved, who happened to be Amy Apollody, give Amy a little shout out. Yeah. And that, mid to late 90s, actually, and probably late 90s. And it really spoke to me. And I still had this very, very intense life in the yoga world. And then 9/11 happened. And that really, for me, that was really the turning point. And I talk about it a lot, and I've written about it because that was when everything really shifted for me. And I had a hard time reconciling sitting in a room, making objects and drawings at that point in time for myself. When I lived downtown, I watched it live. It's like, it was a pretty intense event. And I just felt like I had nothing to say, and I couldn't write. I couldn't make work. I couldn't do anything. And the only thing that felt good to me was moving on my mat in community. And so I ended up doing a teacher training with Amy, which is how I brought her up. And I never had any intention of being a yoga teacher. I just wanted to dive into yoga. And back then, this was right after 9/11. So it was January 2002. There were no immersions. There was nothing like that existed. So the only way to really get serious about yoga was either to go to India, and study with, someone over there in an ashram, or to do a teacher training here in New York. And I emerged from this teacher training half a year later thinking, wait a minute, who am I? Do I want to teach yoga? This is so weird. This was not part of the plan. And I resisted for a long time, and I went back and forth, and my yoga world and my MoMA life overlapped for years and years and years. And I finally exited MoMA, and I still make artwork and everything, but it's more in the service of my yoga. I felt like I needed to rediscover the spiritual in my artwork, because that was always what was behind everything I did. It was always like a spiritual endeavor. It was always a spiritual practice, creativity, whether, you're making music or creating an asana class or meditation or making a drawing. And it took me a while outside of the sort of gallery scene and game and the swimming with sharks to rediscover that love and that sweetness that had always spoken to me so deeply earlier in my life with artwork. So I lived this very weird hybrid life now. I've been teaching since 2002, but still art is a big part of my life, and increasingly writing has sort of taken over. So it's this interesting thing.
Beautiful. Yeah, your writing is exquisite. Your book's amazing. All of your posts are so artful and invoke a real honesty and contemplation, and really beautiful watching your journey through the cancer and post that, and just how candid you are, I think is, well, I can feel it, how helpful it is and inspiring, and helping people to get really honest with the complexity of the human experience. So it'd be nice to, I know how honest and seemingly comfortable you are sharing with that journey, which is awesome, because our society tends to just sweep that type of stuff behind, the curtains of denial and ignorance. So it's really beautiful and refreshing how it seems like art, the way you've shared that part of your journey, the kind of the unknown of it, the struggles of it, the insights from it, it's been really incredible watching that journey. So for starters, like, thank you for letting us into that part of your life. And also I bow to you for the inspiration, really, in helping people that are in similar situations, but even just societally, I think it's really needed to bring that into just really honest conversation, huh?
Thank you. That's such a huge compliment to me. Thank you. I mean, it's the thing that's interesting about it is if you actually scroll back on like my Instagram, because it's all on social media. If you scroll back to, before I announced it, I basically announced it the night before my double mastectomy. And if you scroll back to before that time, you'll see my Instagram. It's like only occasional pictures of myself, and it's like, here's a picture of my puja, here's a picture of the temple in India that I go to, of the great Nataraja temple. Here's sort of like, once in a while, yoga pose. That was a fun day, But there was virtually nothing ever about my private life, like ever. And I've always been extremely private. And I don't talk about my relationships. I don't talk about, it's just been my nature. It's just who I am. Growing up in New England, or being a Scorpio, or whatever it is. I don't know what it is. Everyone can have their theory about it, but I don't really know. But I struggled. I really, really struggled before this was happening, because I didn't know what the outcome was going to be. And once I knew, I was being observed for 3.5 years with stage 0 breast cancer, which is like, is it going to happen? Is it not going to happen? And then it finally went into my lymph nodes. And so they said, you probably have to have some treatment, but we think it's really minor. We won't know until after the surgery. And so I thought, well, maybe I can just disappear from social media for 3 months. And everyone will just be like, oh, she's taking a break. Yogis do that. She's meditating somewhere, And then the more I thought about it, the more I was like, this goes against everything I believe in, really. Like, I can't, as yoga teachers, and meditation teachers, we help people, with their lives. When things fall apart, we help them. We're there for them. And that's when a lot of people discover yoga. That's how I discovered it. Like after 9/11, rediscovered it, and I felt, frankly, like it would be out of integrity and disingenuous, really, for me to pretend everything was fine and taking a break from social media. Like, what does that mean about anything I wrote in my book? What does that mean about any article I've ever written? And what does that mean about what I say in class? So the minute I understood that, because I was struggling with it with my family, and like, my parents, you don't have to say anything. My sister was like, what's the matter? Tell everybody, And once I realized it was a simple issue of integrity, it actually was like exhaling. I was like, oh, okay, well, I don't have a choice then. This is what I need to do. And it was a relief to feel that way. And what I didn't expect, it's kind of interestingly, was the outpouring of support. And that, because that's not why I did it, Normally I'd be like, I don't want anyone to know this awful thing's happening to my body. I didn't want people to look at me strangely. I was like, I know that when I talk to people and I talk about it, people are like, oh, really? They're taking a peak now. See what they look like. It's human nature. And now I joke around about it. I'm always like, oh, you want to see them, But but the reality was, at that point in time, before it happens, it's so horrifying. It's so awful, like to lose a body that I've actually always really loved, and go into the unknown. It was so excruciating that it didn't occur to me that I'd get support for announcing it. It just was like, I just did excite to do it. So I was amazed. And because I I was so public about it, I just kind of like let it all out. And writing is always like my my best therapy, like writing, when I write, it's like I'm pulling things out of myself that are stuck or clogged or hurtful. And every time I do a piece of writing, I'm just like, oh, thank God, you know?
Mm.
So that ended up being a big part of my healing for myself. And then having all these people wrote to me and said, oh, you need to do this, and you need IV hydration, and you need this, and do this for this, and do this to help manage this. And then it was a good thing I announced it, because I ended up, the doctors were shocked at the extent of it. And I ended up having 9 lymph nodes out of 10 positive for cancer. And they thought it was going to be nothing. They thought maybe 1. And so I got slammed with months of chemo and radiation. And so I was out of commission for a full 7 months. And then I started teaching again when I started radiation, which was insane, but I had to do something to get back into my life. So I went through 9 full months of treatment. And I'm still, like trying to grapple with what happened to me for the past, year or so of my life. But anyway,
Wow.
about in public, that was kind of
Yeah, that's huge. And I think I've heard you write or speak. I feel it in my memory. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you feel like post all of this, it's kind of brought out a deeper sense of humor.
yeah.
Yeah, right? You like, people are saying you're funnier and you're...
Yeah. One of my best friends who took me to chemo several times, I mean, just said, wow, and her husband's been through it and everything. So she gets to say stuff like that. She's like, wow, you're much funnier when you have cancer. You're much funnier. And we would be laughing. Like I'd be getting chemo, like taped up stuff all over me and like all this stuff. And we'd be like laughing. And the nurses were like, you guys are hilarious. I'm on medical marijuana. So that's something.
Right.
So, I'm like, I don't know. It's like you develop a shortcut to the absurd, and you have to go there, because if you don't, you'll be crying, It's a choice, that edge between laughing and crying.
Right.
And then when you're on that laughing jag, it's kind of hilarious. You're like, this embodiment, I think I wrote a post lately that like embodiment is crazy. And that's like, it was just going through my head. I was like, embodiment's crazy. This is crazy.
Crazy. It reminds me a little bit about Ram Dass sharing about when he was at his mother's funeral, in which he was observing the kind of norm of how you're meant to be in a moment of mourning someone's death, especially your mother's. And everyone's looking at him, and he had just come back from India, and he was high from the transmission from Maharaji, but also still in the psychedelic realm. So he's on LSD. And he's in a deep mystical experience connecting with his mother's soul, and he's ecstatic. So he's at a funeral, everyone's dressed in black, and then here he is in his Indian white kind of attire, and he's blissing out, like smiling and ecstatic, but trying to put on the mask of societal normalcy, and felt the kind of predicament of like, fuck, like, should I try and act the way everyone's acting, or should I be authentic with like the cosmic joke and the bliss and the beauty? And it kind of reminded me of that. Like most people expect, okay, you've got cancer, you got to act in a certain way, or you've got to suffer in a certain way. And here you are, like it's bringing out more humor, It's just an interesting situation to observe, like the challenging aspects of life are shit, on one level they're shit, but they cook us and they bring up more beauty in a way. Like I've got quite a few, a lot of people I work one-on-one with are deep in suffering of one way or another, whether it be just normal kind of day-to-day suffering or stuff like cancer, And I see it as well, like when they really are present to it, it brings out something really raw and true and beautiful. Like Ram Dass also speaks about like that as fierce grace,
Right.
like the shit of life being shit, and we don't wish it upon anyone, but it's serving as this kind of spiritual sandpaper that tends to wake people up. Can you feel that in your experience of going through cancer?
So profound. And I love
Mm,
that you bring up Ram Dass, because I mean, while I have many teachers, like for me during this journey, like he was one of the people who really resonated for me. And I've only met him once, you know, it was many years ago. It was closer, like after his stroke and stuff, was closer to that time. But Fierce Grace pretty much defined the past year of my life. Um, it was really powerful. And for me, it was also deep Kali sadhana. And I have these very strong attachments to these temples in Tamil Nadu in South India, the great Nataraja temple and the great temple of Tillai Kali. And I had interestingly we had done an Abhishekam, me and two friends of mine, two close friends, the previous January, and I felt like, and it was so intense and so powerful. It's hard to even explain how intense that moment was. But I felt like I was a completely different person after that, and that I was ready. I knew that this might be coming. You know, I've been waiting for this to come. And I mean, Kali is fierce grace. You know, if you want to talk about what ferocity and grace all wrapped up in one package are, that's Kali, that's Ma, you know? So for me, that got me through. And I felt, you know, everyone's so scared of Kali. She's so scary. And I was like, yeah, I don't know if I want a Kali Murti in my home. You know, I don't, you know, and let me tell you, after that, I still have the string around my wrist from a year and a half ago from it. And I was like, you don't get to cut this off to the doctor. So I was like, only if I turn purple and swell up do you get to cut it off. You don't get to. I was like, it's religious, because that's the only way that they'll say no. And you can't just be like, it's a thing, you know. So you're like, okay. But that got me through. Like, I understood. It was such a deep experience. Abhishekam is like the pouring over of liquids and oils, and she's coated in a mound of kumkum, like a mountain of red kumkum, and her eyes are oiled and staring out, and that's it. That's all you see. So when they pour the oil over her, it pools like blood around your feet. And so you're standing. You look down, it looks like you're standing in a pool of blood. And I can't, you know, I can't explain it more than that, really. It's just a very deep experience where you feel like that your access and your proximity to life and death are just right there. And I feel like in another way, that's kind of what Ram Dass was talking about, even though he from a less frightening maybe point of view. But once you're in that place where you're in a frightening place, it's not frightening anymore, you know? So my sort of like hesitations about like Kali in some ways were just washed away, and I felt held by her, because when you're having your body cut open and being stitched back up again with foreign objects underneath, and having poison pumped into your body and then being burned, like, you better be walking with Kali. You better be walking with someone who can handle that. And like, if you're not with her, you might want to find a way to get with her, because who else is going to walk through the fire with you? Like, when you're walking through the fire, that's Kali territory. And you, like, own it and be in it and with it and be her. And so, yeah, here's grace.
Beautiful. Yeah. Just for listeners that have no idea who Kali is, so they can have a bit more connection to that. I know you've got a deep connection with Kali. Could you speak about what, even starting real simple in like the literal worshipping of Kali? Who is Kali? Where does it originate from? And then to the more experiential and what you've experienced.
Sure. Kali is the great Hindu goddess in the Hindu pantheon. She is the most ferocious of goddesses. I mean, we have beautiful ones like Lakshmi, who's auspicious and, you know, good luck, all these things. And Kali is ferocity. So she's scary. So when you see that picture of the goddess with her tongue hanging out of her mouth and her eyes crossed, and she has a necklace of skulls, and she is standing often on top of her beloved, who is Shiva, or sometimes on top of a corpse, like there, it depends. She is ferocity. She's absolute ferocity. And a lot of people are like, well, why is there a goddess to that? Like, that's no fun, you know? The idea is, the easiest way to think about her is that there is sort of a spiritual existence to every aspect of existence. Like everything that exists, you can be in conversation with that. Like we're going to have ferocity in our lives, fear in our lives, gruesomeness, like anger. We're going to have these things whether we like them or not. So when you create sort of a relationship to that, you know better how to deal with it. So in a way, she is all of that, and you figure out how to deal with it. The other thing about Kali that's really important to understand is that she is all possibility. And my philosophy teacher of many years, Douglas Brooks, is an expert on Hindu Tantra, talks about her as he's like, she's the primal scream when you were born, and she's your last breath as you exit. So she's really about life and death. And she's seen as being like the ferocious aspect of the divine mother. So like, when there's an earthquake and there's a tornado and there's a this and there's a that, and it's terrifying, it's nature, but it's ferocious too. So that's all seen as being Kali. There's nothing that isn't her. So it's like, if you think of her as the ocean, it's like we as human beings, we're born, we rise up like little waves, we dance around for a while, and then we drop back into her. And that's a way of thinking about who she is. And all possibility is scary, and life is scary because we're not in control. So that fear aspect is just being real about what life is like. So it's not supposed to scare you. It's just scary because life is scary.
Yeah. So during your journey with cancer, practically, how would you call upon Kali to help you through it? Could you give an example of like being just, I don't know, getting the diagnosis, getting the kind of, I don't know, fear response or something like that? I don't know if you did. Was Kali right there for you, or was it a practice for you to go, all right, fuck, this is shit. All right, let's go deep. Or what was your experience?
I think she was there in the worst parts of treatment. The anticipation of the surgery and the treatment are so disorienting and so bizarre. You're not in the horror yet, you're in the pre-horror.
Yeah.
I've never used that term before, but it's a new one as of tonight. Pre-horror. And so I wasn't like in Kali land yet. You know what I mean? Like I was in, I don't know what's happening to me. Like this is so surreal. How can this be my life? And sad and angry and resentful, like why me? Why is my body being carved up? Why do I have to worry about dying? And so it was more once I was in it. Once I was like waking up from the surgery and my body was, mangled basically. And I couldn't move my arms and everything hurt. And I was on OxyContin. Like sometimes it's good, sometimes it helps. And going through treatment and it was more. I mean, I chanted a lot. Sometimes just inwardly, like basic Kali mantra. But sometimes chanting is. And it doesn't even matter. This is what I tell people all the time. I'm deeply into yoga philosophy clearly, and have these deep roots in this stuff. But I teach lots of people who aren't interested in it at all. And I'm like, whatever a mantra means to you, it can be in words in English, but like when they're Sanskrit and it's an old mantra, it has kind of a history of vibration. And just as words carry power and words have vibration, like when you say hateful words, they resonate. When you say loving words, they resonate. Mantra does the same thing on a really powerful level. So we all know, like if you repeat something over and over and over again, it weaves its way into your tissues and your consciousness and your mind. And whether that's like, saying I love you to myself, which I had to do for a while, because at a certain point, it was hard for me to look at my own body and what had happened to it, and just like these scars slicing across the middle of my body and me not looking the way I ever looked before. I had to do a practice of like looking at myself in the mirror and telling myself like, I love you, I love you, I love you, I love you. And it was one of the toughest things I've ever done. So that was a mantra practice as well. So I would do Kali mantra, just saying like, get me through this, get me through this. Speaking to that aspect of myself that is Kali. Like, I know I have that ferocity. I know I have that tenacity. I know I have that power. But when I speak to it, I can access it. I'm calling to that thing inside myself that we're calling Kali. So that's kind of what I'd really like to convey to people, because people get like, well, I believe in this, I believe in that. That's
Right.
not, I believe in that. And it's, I don't treat it, I don't consider myself religious at all. Like I don't think about it as something outside of myself. I think of it as an energy in the universe, which resides in me, in you, in all of us, in the air, everything. There's ferocity. Like, look at an animal eating another animal, there you have it. So, yeah, can you act that power and use it for good?
Yeah, for people that are vibing with that and they're kind of, maybe they're even deep in a process themselves, which we all are in one way or another, but maybe someone's really looking for that type of practice. Could you offer the mantra to invoke that contemplation, that connection? Do you feel like offering the mantra?
Okay, let me see which one. There's so many Kali mantras.
Yeah. Or even just a contemplation for someone that's vibing
Yeah,
off that.
easier than getting into a bunch of bijas and Sanskrit.
Yeah, even just a contemplation to help one connect with Kali.
Yeah, I mean, a really easy one is like Om Krim Talikaye Namaha. But I think you can do something as simple as saying Kali Ma.
Yeah.
Meaning great mother, meaning nature, meaning the universe.
Yeah.
Kali Ma. So you're calling to that ferocious aspect of nature and saying, like, walk with me. And that I think, Kali Ma, Kali Ma, Kali Ma. And you can really, chanting that, you're just acknowledging, and you're saying, like, I'm in the fire. I know I'm in the fire, and I know that I can keep moving, and I can get to the other side where there's grace.
And it seems to be a practice of not just the common kind of spiritual bypass of like, all right, this is shit, but I got to get on with it and put on a positive kind of facade, which is pretty common, and it can be effective. It can. This seems like a really balanced approach in which you're diving deep into the ferocity of the experience, at the same time bringing in the loving affirmation that you're speaking of. I love you, I love you, I love you, which kind of, it feels very balanced in bringing in the light of love, at the same time being with the inevitability of the darkness and the unpredictability or the intensity. It feels really balanced.
Yeah, I think on a very basic level, the only way we know what beauty is by its opposite.
Yeah.
We're defined by their opposite. And the only way we know joy is because we also have experienced, like, agony, or like, we know happiness because we know sadness. So it's like all of those extremes indicate that the opposite exists. Yeah. So they're not really separate. They're two sides of the same thing. It's like a yin yang thing.
And I remember you either writing or talking, once again, about being in the reconstructive process with your breasts, and that really challenging your idea of femininity and feminine beauty. I think that would be really powerful for people to hear your experience of going through that as well.
Yeah. To me, as I said, the anticipation was excruciating, because I'm actually one of those unusual women who's always loved my body. And I sort of, I've known that, and I've always been grateful that I've been a woman who loved my body, because I have many friends who don't love their bodies, and many students who don't love their bodies. And I've known I was fortunate. To have a body that I loved. So the anticipation of no longer having that was just torturous. And so when I went through it, I just thought, like, how am I ever going to, like, do anything again? How am I going to, right before it happened, honestly, I was like, I don't even want to live. I can't do this. I can't have my body carved up like this. I don't want to live like that. I don't want to look like that, and then you do it and you're like, oh, well, now this is my life. And first of all, you're trying too hard to survive, to think like, I don't like the way I look. You're just trying to survive. Like, it's really just about survival for the first month of recovery. And then all of a sudden there's chemo, and then there's that. And you kind of, there isn't a lot of time to mourn what's happened when you're plunged into that, because you're just doing, and there's so much overwhelm. And I think having to really deal with, what being feminine means. And I've always kind of been a girly girl, which is like funny. And I'm always like, oh, I want to wear a dress and blah, blah, blah. Like, I'm a serious hardcore feminist, and always have been. When I was little, apparently even all my stuffed animals were like she. I was like, they're girls, they're girls. My parents were like, hey, I was like proud feminist at like, even when I was like a teenager, I was very outspoken about things. But at the same time, like a happy girly feminist, So the idea of losing my breasts was devastating to me, and my sense of who I was. Like, that was part of who I was. And so I'm still wrapping my brain around how differently I feel about what femininity means now. And I mean, even while I was going through it, this is going to sound really strange, but I actually felt the most feminine I've ever felt. And here I am, like, losing half my hair, with my breasts cut out and no nipples anymore. Like, those are gone. I don't even, some women get to keep that and they look kind of normal afterwards, not me. So for me, I was like, why is it that I feel more feminine? Wow. And I think it was this deep connection with this, like the female, the divine feminine, which I'm calling, in this case, Kali. But also that sense of earthiness, and that sense of, like, when you're trying to survive, you're this thing, you're part of nature, you're just trying to live, and you feel that life force. If you really are like, I want to live, and you feel that inside yourself. And I felt profoundly connected to the universe and to other people, even when I was miserable. And I felt very feminine. My awareness of my body and my awareness of how I moved, even when it was hard to move, even when I couldn't lift my arms, and there's going to be a lot of writing coming about it, because I actually don't understand it yet. Like, I think it's going to take me a while to understand it, actually, why I felt more feminine rather than less. And maybe it's because a superficial marker of my femininity was gone. And so I had no choice. I had to search for the deeper ones. That could be it. Maybe I might be figuring it out right now as we're talking.
Yeah. It's giving me tingles just hearing you talk about it, so feel free to keep figuring it out on air, because it's that's huge, and I think really, again, helpful for people to hear. It reminds me a little bit of my wife Jo's experience with seeking the divine feminine and wanting to awaken that deep actualized experience of the goddess and the divine feminine. And this was a few years ago now, and she was doing a lot of ayahuasca ceremonies. That was while her parents were dying, essentially, and she was wanting to just deal with it in that way. And she was like, all right, let's go deep into the divine feminine. And she was asking ayahuasca, which is to many often regarded as the grandmother, a similar type, loving but ferocious energy. Could be similar to Kali, but to me it feels like all the goddesses combined, And then Jo had that kind of fierce confrontation with her, like, fuck, this is the divine feminine, like, holy shit. She went into it with that, and admittedly, she's talking very candidly about it as well, of having this preconceived notion of what femininity is, which, like you're uncovering as you were speaking, it's not what we think it is. And it's not so, like, pretty, this old model of femininity is is being re-actualized. And I think through conversations of what you're sharing and through what Joe experienced of like, holy shit, it's so fierce and so beautiful and so not what we thought it was for so long. It reminded me of Joe's potent experience of like, fuck, it's not at all what I thought. And how beautiful to have a direct experience of that and feel your true femininity and your true beauty way beyond the body's appearance. And it's so useful, you know, even through the aging process, which I know some elderly women that are really hating on themselves through the body aging and getting plastic surgery, which is fine, but doing it in a way that's clinging to youth and clinging to this old model of what it is to be feminine and beautiful, and the suffering in it of like trying to stay youthful and trying to stay perfect and trying to conform to this idea of what it was to be feminine and beautiful. And to hear stuff like that of like, you could be just ripped to shreds, and that old idea, I'm saying old, but it's still very current, of beauty, yet you're feeling more feminine than ever. I mean, it's huge.
Very surprising. I mean, one of the things that it also did for me was I had this this moment where I suddenly felt what other people feel when they hate their bodies. And again, I you know, I feel funny saying that because I know that means that I'm pretty privileged, you know. But it hit me on such a deep level. I was like, wow, now I get that. I get what that's like to not be able to stand to look in the mirror in your body. I get it. And it broke it was more than about me, really. Honestly, it was like it broke my heart to feel what I know so many people feel every day of their lives. And it was actually devastating to me.
Yeah.
I just sort of just like, okay, I can't live in this place. I have to change this. And I did start a practice of like standing in front of the mirror and putting my hands on my body, on my breasts, on my shoulder, like all over, and being like, I love you, I love you, I love you. And when I started it, I felt like a fraud, to be honest, because I didn't. I was like, I love you. And I was like, but I don't, you know? And then it was not like a fake it till you make it, but it was just the persistence. Like it was these two parts of me in conversation. And I knew that I had to keep at it like a mantra as a practice until I felt it. And eventually I did. But it was a very devastating dip into how so many people live. And it's heartbreaking, you know?
Yeah.
And I wish I could like embrace them all, you know? Like it's awful to live like that.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that I lived like that for a little while so that I could understand what that was like. And you know what? I know I'm going to have other moments like that. It's not like, oh, when I'm in the clear now, everything's good. You know, I know that's going to come back, you know? I even the other day, I sensed a little bit of it and I was just like, okay, not now. I have stuff to do. You know, but I know it's gonna be a rise and fall, because every time I look at myself in the mirror, you know, every time I take a shower, every time I change my clothes, it's like, there it is. So it's you know, it's humbling.
And thank God to have a sadhana and an awareness to then kind of catch yourself out when you're beating yourself up or having that negative inner dialogue, to be able to even just be aware of it and then bring it into something like a practice. You know, what a gift that is, really.
Yeah, I mean that's sort of the theme of my year. Like how amazing it is to have a sadhana, a spiritual practice, and I just feel like it saved me. Like it saved me. You know, I mean, and I have amazing family and friends and support and loved ones, but I would have been clinging to them so much that they wouldn't have been able to take it. And so I needed a sadhana. I needed the tools. So I'm like, well, that was interesting. I worked for that long to deal with this, you know? And I was really grateful.
Yeah, it's incredible how grace can come in spontaneously as well, though. As we talk about these types of fierce situations, a story popped into my mind of years ago. I remember hearing this story, seeing it visually actually, of this woman who was a model, quite a renowned model. And that was her identity, that was her income, that was her everything. And then her hair got caught in this machine. She was in a factory, got caught in this machine and literally ripped off her face. Ripped off her face, literally. And she was describing this situation post in retrospect. Literally, and she didn't have a spiritual practice. She admits she didn't have a spiritual practice, So after all the surgery and suffering, of course, she was able to, physically, she didn't get her typical beauty back, but she also felt more beautiful than ever. She felt more feminine than ever. And the way she described it was like that so fiercely, like ripped away her egoic sense of like identity. This is me. I'm beautiful. Da, da, da. And it just ripped it away on every level. And gradually, her true feeling of beauty blossomed through it. And it was a fierce grace, like a huge awakening, which just popped into my mind. I haven't thought about that in years, but I mean, the grace just came through. And I've also read stories about people in like concentration camps and situations like that. And they've written about the intense suffering and having everything taken away, you know, their kids, their job, their lover, their everything, all identity form stripped away, nothing left. And probably you're going to be killed tomorrow, you know, or tortured or something. And them writing about the mystical experience of the awakening of their heart, of connecting to what's ultimately real, even in the face of like absolute turmoil, you know? So every now and then I like to dip into those stories of people that didn't have a practice, didn't have a mantra to call on, didn't have anything, yet in the face of the darkest aspects of life, like this love and this clarity and this bliss coming into experience, you know, which just adding to the potency of this deep conversation, you know?
It's beautiful. Yeah. It's surprising and strange. And it gives this little inkling of how little we know and how much possibility there is out there and how much more we have to know. Like we're like, wow, life is just crazy.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And fascinating and limitless and inexplicable. And sometimes that goes shortcuts to the absurd and makes you laugh. And other times it fills you with wonder. And for some people, it fills you with fear, you know? Yeah. So it depends on, or maybe a combination, like a cocktail, all those things.
So what's cooking for you now? What are you excited about for now and the future and your teachings and whatnot? What's happening in your life?
Well, I have so many writing projects in the works. I can't even tell. There's so many that I'm just like, okay, I have to get really organized and really like lay them out. So, and I have a publisher, Chronicle, but I'm also in talks with another publisher, for a different kind of book that it wouldn't be Chronicle's sort of thing. Like Chronicle makes these beautiful books. My book was published by Chronicle. But I am going to write sort of a when things fall apart type book. And it was never my intention to do so, but it kind of wrote itself. I mean, I've shared so much of it on social media, so it'll be reworking some of what I've shared, plus other stuff that I haven't shared, shifting it, figuring out how it's going to go together. And it'll be about having a sadhana. I mean, when you said that, I was like, that's spot on, because that's really been what it means to have a sadhana, you know, and when things fall to pieces, what you do and what it means and how you move through it. And seen through the lens of my own experience, but I think that, you know, what I went through, so many people go through in their own ways. You know, there's no one listening to this, you know, who hasn't had incredibly traumatic things happen to them in their lives. It's just part of being human, you know. So how do we live in the best possible way, and how do we move through these things, and what does it mean to practice? You know, we love this word practice. It's a great word. It's so like vague and big and sprawling, you know. What does it mean to practice, to have a practice, to have all these things, you know? What does it mean to link the body and the spirit? You know, what do all these things mean, you know? So that will be coming. and I don't think that will be with Chronicle. It'll probably be with this other publisher who will remain unnamed for the moment. But I think, you know, hopefully everyone will be happy, because I have other things to go toward Chronicle. So we'll see what happens. That's the stuff I'm most excited about right now. All these little projects, and they all involve writing, and some involve possibly, you know, like drawings and stuff too. That'll be in there. So I'll be able to bring the art piece back in, which will be really great for me. Very labor intensive, but it'll be interesting. So that's the stuff I'm the most excited about. And then on top of that, you know, I'm teaching more classes than I've ever taught before. I've never been a big public class teacher, but I did it to get myself back on track, because I found it very hard. And I'm still struggling quite a bit, to be honest, with really moving forward, because there's this huge existential thing where I sit around, not a depressive thing at all, but just where I sit around and I think I should be doing this, that, and I make my lists and my bullet points and my this, and then I think, or I could just binge Netflix.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's really kind of a coin toss which of those things I'll decide to do. Yeah. Because I could be born tomorrow, and I really want to watch like another episode of Queer Eye, you know? So I'm like, I'm going to do that tonight, you know? That's what I did last night, you know? And it's just kind of funny. Or I really want to go for a walk. I want to spend time with my friends and family, you know? And so why not? Why wouldn't I, you know? Am I going to regret having spent time with my friends and family, or am I going to regret all the time if I'm gone, you know, tomorrow? Am I going to regret having like stayed here over my computer all night? So it's, you know, it's a very funny thing, but it's turned me into a little bit of a procrastinator. And it's, so I'm struggling a little with that. I'm hoping that, I think bit by bit I'll move through it. But for right now, it's still a little bit of a struggle, and I have to kind of accept that it's part of my healing process, you know? Yeah. So I took a lot of public classes just so I would have to be answerable to other people.
Right.
on almost daily basis. And it's been great. And my teaching I'm loving my teaching, and I've had so much to say. And I just did a whole round of teaching back in Europe, in Paris and Lyon and London. And I've just been invited to Aix and some other places, and so in some places in Sweden. So I'm hoping that I have to organize all that. You know, I have to make that happen and balance out all these different things. So being a creative person, and also really, you know, so all these writing projects and art projects, but also like connecting with people. I mean, I want to really connect with other people. I feel like I can help people get through this. I mean, I have to say, this is a total divergence, but there are days when I spend 4 hours on Instagram messaging with women saying, this is what you need to get through chemo successfully. Do this, do this, do this, do this, do this. And it's actually a huge part of my weekly activity. And sometimes I'm like, what happened to my day? And then I remember, oh, I was able to help these other women. And not just women, like, you know, I have a friend whose husband's going through chemo. You know, I have like all these, I mean, we all know someone who's going through it, you know, and I'm able to be of assistance. Just the way people helped me, I can continue to pass that along, what I learned and how to get through it, because the doctors tend to not tell you anything.
Well, on that note, for any listeners that are going through recovery from cancer, going through chemo and so forth, well, what advice do you have, on top of the typical medical suggestions?
Well, first of all, I tell them if they really have questions, they want to know how to get through certain things they need to do, really just message me, because I do spend hours answering people. But I feel like it's one of the most important things I can be doing right now. So I don't care. That's what I want to do.
Good on you. That's great.
It's so important. And honestly, you need to, first of all, really self-advocate. Like if you are feeling like, I don't know, I feel like that doctor's not listening to me, but you're right. And you have to say, like, you have to treat yourself. This is really important. You have to treat yourself like your loved one. You have to treat yourself like your lover, your best friend, your parent, your child, your everything. And so you have to detach a little bit from your churning and say, like, what do I need to do to take care of this being? And to get into another one, I wanted to say this earlier, actually, I thought I understood what self-love meant before this past year of my life, but I did not. And now I do. And I had no idea that I didn't know what it meant. Because I was in a position where I had to advocate so intensely for myself, despite the fact that I had other people around. Like, I had to fire my oncologist and get a new one. And, a lot of people say leave their oncologist. I've chosen to use the term fire, because people who are going through a medical procedure need to understand that those doctors are working for them.
Totally.
So if they're doing their jobs and if they're not answering their questions, they need to say, hey, I need my questions answered. I'm trying to heal myself. And like, you're going to look better as a doctor if I heal myself well. So answer my questions. And I had a terrible oncologist. Terrible. And I had to get rid of her. I filed a complaint against her at the hospital, and I got a new one. I got the head of the department, who was wonderful.
Yeah.
It was really unfortunate. I'm talking a top cancer hospital, so so people need to self-advocate, and they need to choose self-love. And if they can't feel it, they need to step out of themselves. It's like a meta-cognitive process and be like, what does that being need? This is what I need to do. And they need to be relentless. And they need to call upon everyone they know and ask for help. If you know of anyone who, blah, 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 blah. Really important.
Yeah. For sure. Yeah, again, watching Joe's parents through that process, and watching Joe was doing a similar thing. Like her mum was unable to do what you said, coming from that kind of vantage point of like, doctors are gods, and even if in my gut it seems like a shitty doctor saying totally just poor accuracy in their diagnostics, which is what she had. She was misdiagnosed for years, but for years, and she could feel in her gut that, but the doctor was a god, so you can't find a different doctor. It's like finding a different God, which you can do as well. But then kind of Joe stepped in and did what you're speaking of. So, I mean, it's so empowering if one can create that shift of self-love. That's huge.
It was the one time I was actually really crying during the treatment. And it was crying, just absolute frustration and like just feeling floored that these people wouldn't take care of me. Like I had terrible side effects and from the chemo, and that weren't textbook. And so they were like, it's not the chemo. And they wouldn't do it. And I was like, if I get a hangnail right now, it's the chemo. What are you talking about? Everything's the chemo, And they also really discounted the fact that I knew anything about the body, And my diaphragm, to be specific, my diaphragm was in spasm and I was having convulsive coughing. And I later found out it was as simple as acid reflux, and I'd never had it before. I didn't know what it was, and which is a side effect of Taxol, which is the second kind of chemo I was on. And they were like, just they just discounted it. Like they were just like, nah, that's nothing to do. Take some cough medicine. And I'm like, no, like
Mm.
this is happening from the chemo. Like this is ridiculous. And fortunately, a lot of the nurses, you know, often the greatest advocates in these situations are like the nurses who are on the front lines of it. And the nurses on the infusion floor and the hospital, the chemo floor, were incredible and really advocated for me and encouraged me and said, it's not you, it's them.
Mm.
And so I felt really fortunate to have that kind of support from within the hospital. And I don't know whether I would have filed a report without it, but I'm really glad I did. And I later found out several other people also left that same doctor in that hall. So it's just, I offer it out there because I think it's important for people to hear, because you
Totally.
can go, my doctor. Other people say to me, don't change your oncologist mid-treatment. I'm like, but my oncologist is negligent. Doesn't care that like I can't breathe. So, yeah. So it was
Yeah,
interesting.
that's very empowering advice for sure. Are you like with immune system stuff? Are you up on like advice for what can help people with boosting their immune system and that kind of thing? Or
I don't really know. I mean, to be honest, there's so many different approaches.
Mhm.
I've never been a good juicer. Like
Yeah.
Chinese medicine works better for me personally,
Mhm.
and I was severely anemic during treatment, and the way I got out of it, and this is going to horrify like half the people listening, but the way I got out of it was eating grass-fed burgers because I was so anemic and I
Mhm.
was not allowed to take iron supplements. And I was on the verge for several weeks of having blood transfusions, and I was passing out multiple times a day in my apartment, and I couldn't walk down the hall. And I finally was like, delivery. In New York City, the beauty of New York City called for delivery. And so I'm sorry, everybody listening out there, thinks I'm a demon for eating red meat, but it was survival for me and it got me out of it.
Mhm.
And so it's, that sort of, it's interesting, it goes against what everyone wants to say, you
Mhm.
know, drink green juice and do this and do that. And let me tell
Right.
you, all the spinach in the world didn't do anything for me.
Hmm.
As much as I love them. I love a green juice, but it was
It
like
was the burger.
at that moment in my life, that was just survival for me. And I was
Yeah.
like, that's what it turns into. And it was like bone broth and yeah, red meat and it got me out of anemia. It was
Hmm.
the only thing that got me out of anemia. And I wasn't
Yeah.
allowed for some reason to have iron supplements. I wasn't allowed to do any of the other things you can do.
Hmm.
Yeah. So, it, I don't know. I think it's so individual. I think
Yeah.
I have friends who are vegan who are so healthy and it suits them so beautifully. I've been borderline anemic my whole life and I can't, it just doesn't suit me. I don't
Mhm.
eat much meat, but I know sometimes when I need it, I need it. And my body is like, oh, thank God when I have
Yeah.
it. And then I go back to like my sauteed kale and I'm really happy.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that type of conversation's needed in the kind of spiritual vegan community, which, like we're seeing in other areas of the world, it can be so polarized, this kind of
Uh,
extreme left versus extreme right. And we see that in the argument of vegan or meat. And I think a healthy, educated, just aware conversation on that is good, because some people need in their constitution, in their energetic constitution, maybe could do with some meat, and that's like medicine for them. And I've been in that position of being extreme vegetarian and being very judgmental of people that do eat meat. I've been in that. And looking back, it didn't feel good. Like it felt very righteous and it felt very right, but it didn't feel good. It felt again just polarizing and couldn't relate, couldn't just have a conversation around it. So it feels healthy, I think, in our communities to just hear it out. It's not just black and white and like all or nothing. Um, Joe, my wife, again, I keep bringing her into the conversation because she's been vegetarian her whole life. She made the choice when she was a kid, but while she's also struggled with anemia a lot as well, and then while breastfeeding and making babies, she was just malnourished. She was depleted, and nutritionists and experts, and they just kept saying, you got to eat some red meat, and she didn't want to. She didn't want it, like on a psychological and like moral level. She's like, no, I'm a vegetarian. I don't eat meat. And she just kept sitting with it. And we were seeing like our kid Soleil, our daughter Soleil, being attracted to meat, like very just wanting meat. And then it was like, oh, okay. And then Joe kept getting instructed, yeah, maybe you should eat meat. You're so fucking depleted. Just have a bit of meat. You could have this and you could have that. But again and again, she kept hearing, just have some red meat. It's like, look at it as like medicine for the time being, and then reassess later. And she really tackled with it for a while, and then became comfortable with it, like really like connecting with her moral kind of standpoint, but then going a little deeper than that. And she came to a really balanced perspective on the meat eating thing, which I've kind of come into as well. And it feels much more balanced, in that we see like there's huge issues with the whole meat industry and how animals have been treated. Like that's not it, because that's the instant kind of knee-jerk reaction from the vegan standpoint, which is true. It's like, yeah, we need to change, how we've viewed meat for sure, without a doubt. But often that argument can be like this opaque veil that cuts off a deeper, more like intelligent conversation on the meat thing. So I like to bring it into conversation. And like you apologized if anyone got triggered through like you eating your burger. It's like, I'm like, yeah, sorry as well. At the same time, let's talk about it. Let's come into a deeper, balanced view of it. And I
never brought it up if it weren't for cancer. I was just sort of like, I'm trying so hard not to die.
Yeah. I meet a lot of vegans as well that aren't doing it smart, and could probably do with a burger as well, and I kind of apologize for that. At the same time, no, let's talk about it. Let's talk a little smarter about it as a community, because even that polarization is just another one of those divides, that we love to like belong to one side of the camp, Let's all come together and talk about it. I think it's a healthy thing.
Yeah, I think so too.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's gradually wrap this up. Is there anything else you want to mention to our listeners or viewers?
I mean, there's one thing that we didn't touch upon that is a huge issue for me.
Sure.
And so I'm going to touch upon it because I think I'm going to be doing more writing on it, and hopefully some public writing.
Great.
That is one of the things that's been very like stunning to me in this journey through cancer has been the semantics of cancer, and deeply problematic. And semantics meaning the languaging surrounding it. And from day one, I knew I did not want to be that person who was saying "fuck cancer" and like all this stuff. And all the metaphors for cancer are battle metaphors. And given I love the Bhagavad Gita, I love all the Hindu epics, that are Devi Mahatmya, that are all taking place on a battlefield, because it's a metaphor for consciousness and your existence and everything. But I have to say, I find it very unhelpful when you're trying to manage a misalignment in your body. To speak about it in terms of war and, kill the cancer, cut the cancer out, cancer, we all have cancer cells. This is something actually most people don't know. Yeah. We all have cancer cells in our body. All of us, every single person, everybody listening to this, I'm sorry, but you do. So it's just a matter of whether they kind of go rogue or not. And so the idea is, how have you, who knows like what it was, an overload of estrogen in my case, that was part of it, that was feeding it. There are all kinds of things that were sort of strangely aligned possibly in my body that weren't, I grew up in a town with bad drinking water, you know what I mean? Like stuff like that, really big, environmental factors. And, do you really want to be at war with your body? like it's a misalignment. How do you bring this ecosystem that is our individual bodies within the greater ecosystem of the world? How do you bring it back into alignment? And so if you can speak lovingly to your body instead of treating it like there's this invader. The first doctor I went to said to me, I know how you feel, like your body's been invaded. And I was like, I got really angry. And I said, you don't know how I feel. You don't know me. You don't know anything about me. As I'm crying, I was like, you don't know me. You don't know anything about me. You don't know how I feel. But I mean, and that was it. I didn't go back to that hospital. And I was just stunned that someone would say that to me. That's not how I feel. And so that tells you a lot about the approach to cancer. And I feel like it keeps people from healing. It keeps people from being empowered to know that this is an ecosystem and we can eat the right things and we can do the right things. We can exercise. We can do all these things to care for our bodies to get through this experience optimally. And I also really believe, and this is my personal theory, but I really believe that it has, slowed down medical approaches and advances because, as we know, we often do not in Western medicine see the body as an ecosystem. And there are amazing integrative oncologists now out there, many on the West Coast and stuff, not on the East Coast of the US. But and there's some, but they're mostly on the West Coast. And in Chicago, the Block Center, all these different people, Donald Abrams are from the West Coast. So, it's beginning, that's going to change in the next 20 or 30 years. And they're like, oh yeah, we should talk about your diet, but, they do it a little, but not that much. But it's a real issue because if you're just talking about cutting and killing and burning and poisoning, you're not addressing the greater issues of why it might have happened in the first place. And I do believe that it's preventing progress. And it used to be you're a cancer victim. Now it's you're a cancer survivor, which I reject that languaging as well, because that's like saying you're a cancer not dead person. And that's monstrous, I'm a person. Why don't you say that for people with pneumonia? Why don't you say, it's like, why is that a case? So everyone's like, are you in remission? And I'm like, I think my cancer's over.
Yeah.
Language is so important. It gets back to the mantra piece. This is part of the mantra piece that we were talking about earlier. So I know we're sort of like going over, we're still talking.
No, that's huge. Keep going. That really is I
want people to speak to their bodies differently and to not be like, yeah, I'm going to kill this thing. I'm going to kick cancer's ass. I mean, if it empowers you, fine. Do whatever you need to do to get through it. Think about telling your body that you love it. Think about saying, like, how can I create a more hospitable climate for like good cells and good genes? And we all know that kind of thinking affects our well-being at this point in time. So like, let's do more of it. And it's not like, unicorn stuff, unicorns and rainbows. It's actually just kind of practical and logical, So I'm hoping that will be a big shift in the medical community, in their languaging. I told every single person in the hospital, I was like, I'm a survivor. And when I explained, they were like, wow, I agree with you. Almost every single doctor agreed with me. So it's interesting.
Very.
So that's my last thing I want to say.
That's awesome. No, that's really inspiring and beautiful. Great to connect, Susanna. Thank you so much for your time. This has been a really beautiful, mind-blowing, heart-opening conversation that I think people are going to love. I think you're an inspiration and really beautiful to connect.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Till next time. Much love, Susanna.
Much love.
Thank you.
Thank you.